I wanted to introduce you not to myself first, but to Fluffy. Fluffy is a pretty famous alligator on one of our resort islands off the coast of North Carolina. Fluffy's a nearly 13-foot alligator. He's kind of the boss of this island. Pretty famous, and we've just released him from giving him a medical checkup. Fluffy is only part of the equation. But the other part of what our work is, we have combined it with directly working in the communities. Over the last 5 years, impacted communities have been out on every field trip with us, collecting data with us, learning the joys of wild animals, and getting experiences that we're going to hope stick with them for the rest of their lives. And why would a toxicologist start to do this? Well, it's because I had been doing lab toxicology, doing community engagement, talking to mothers about the difficulties of things like bisphenol A and the potential impacts, and creating data, putting out impactful papers out into the academic literature. And the job of a toxicologist is to not study poisons, but it's actually to create useful data streams that policymakers and regulators can use to create safe environments for humans and the global planet as a whole. But I want to tell you a little bit of a dirty secret. Toxicology is an applied science that was codified about 60 years ago by industry, mining, pharmaceutical scientists that were largely pharmacologists who took the fundamentals of pharmacology and put it into a science to make safe chemicals. Now, the pharmaceutical industry has done a good job. They've got rules and regulations where they regulate pharmaceuticals, where they have to be safe and effective before they're onto the market. Chemical regulation, industrial chemical regulation, is very different. In fact, industrial chemicals are considered safe until scientists prove they're guilty of being harmful. Now, at scientists in the crowd, we can't prove anything. We work with hypotheses. We move on to the next hypotheses. We keep going. There's always questionable doubt in there. So that makes us generally pretty bad policy regulator wonks. But we learn. We learn to work in these systems. So this system's failing us. And what we've done through this thing is to release chemicals up to or over 350,000 different chemicals on the global market into the environment, with only 1% of those chemicals even ever being tested for toxicity. So what this has done is caused a free flow, this alphabet soup of chemicals coming into the environment that has created this human and ecological experiment for generations now. And when I want to talk to you about one of these chemicals, or this group of chemicals, actually one of my points I want to really make is that PFAS, or these forever chemicals that we've heard about, is not one thing. It's actually about 14,000 different chemical structures, and probably many more because of unregulated production side products, impurities in starting materials, things like that, that are now permeating our planet. PFAS are in the air. They're in the water. They're in you. Every one of us have PFAS in our blood and in our tissues at this moment. This is a map with a couple headlines that were seen in North Carolina when it was discovered in 2017 that there were high levels of this chemical called Gen-X in drinking water. North Carolina circled here. This is a map from the Environmental Working Group. The blue dots are all contaminated drinking water sources that have been documented. You'll see here in Boston, great coverage in this map. Just like in North Carolina. Much of this is through chemical production, the use of firefighting foams at airports and other areas, especially on some military sites that are shown here in purple too. So this is now a $1 trillion cleanup, or more than $1 trillion cleanup problem in the United States. And we've been working in North Carolina on these PFAS now for a number of years, myself and a number of colleagues. And one of the important things I want to point out, that PFAS are not like chemicals that we learned about in college organic chemistry or anything like that. They've got amazing properties. We often think of them as alien chemicals. There are no such thing as highly fluorinated chemicals in nature. Biology does not know how to deal with these chemicals. These chemicals accumulate in our environment. Under normal circumstances, they're never broken down. So once they're there, once Pandora's box has been opened, they're there for a long time. And the other point that I want to make is that to date, every PFAS that has been investigated has been found to be toxic. And we have no reason to believe that that's going to be any different for any of the other PFAS. One of the important toxic targets is the immune system. And we wanted to actually look using a different approach to understand how PFAS toxicity is approaching things. And we're using what's called a One Health approach. And we're trying to bring One Health, the One Health concept, the concept that you cannot understand and benefit human health without taking into account planetary health, animal health, ecosystem health. To date, One Health has been applied largely to look at zoonotic diseases, the transfer of disease from animals to humans. COVID is a great example, as well as things that we're going through right now with avian flu. Part of that is to protect food source, food supply, and to protect human populations from disease. The other part of it that you might be familiar with is this use of sentinel species. Kind of the parable of the canary in the coal mine, where miners used to take down canaries into the coal mines to detect noxious or explosive gases. And that the shared biology of these canaries, through having lungs and respiring, but through the difference in that species of being very sensitive, would actually die and serve as an early warning system for miners to get out of the mine for bad things that happen to people. We're actually using a very different sentinel. That's the American alligator. And crocodiles are not like our sensitive little canary that's going to keel over early. These animals have survived, their lineage has survived 3 mass extinctions. They have one of the most robust immune systems of any animal known. And in fact, they're living in environments, this is one of our canaries in the swamp, who is living actually at our site with lower PFAS contamination. But if you were to get in that water, and you can take my word on this, you would acquire an infection quite quickly. My field work, I've suffered from more than one skin infections from working in these environments. These guys, through their social interactions, will lose a leg or lose part of their tail for their and they'll heal really rapidly within a week or two. Something that would put us down within days or hours. So these are really robust sentinels. And if we look at them and we find problems, we better take notice. The other part of this, before I get into what these studies kind of look like, is our community engagement, which I've already mentioned. And that's the magic sauce, that we are working with kids. And I promise you, if you ever want to do community engagement, pull an 8-foot-long alligator up into somebody's front lawn, plop it up there and start working out, and you will have a crowd. And that actually was on purpose in part of it. So here's our situation in North Carolina. We have fluorochemical production beginning right around 1981, 1982 from DuPont Chemours companies, they had been discharging unknown amounts, unknown types of PFAS into the Cape Fear River. And in 2017, there's extremely high levels of PFAS in humans living in Wilmington, North Carolina. So what we did is we set up a study looking at a site called Lake Waccamaw that is outside the Cape Fear River Basin, but very close to it, hypothesizing that they would have low PFAS levels and that population we could compare to animals on the Cape Fear River. So the first thing that we did, determine how much PFAS were in these animals. And as we predicted, at the sites that are shown here in red, we found on average 30 times higher concentrations of PFAS in the blood of these alligators. We then went on to look to do a battery of, essentially what we were doing is having these alligators go to the doctor. We collected blood for clinical exams, we did on-site exams, and had some very startling results. Shown in this picture is 3 different alligators that had unhealed wounds. And I've already mentioned how robust. Outside of this region, we never see unhealed wounds. And we also noticed some changes in the vasculitis on some of these animals. And that led us to then really investigate what was going on in the immune system. In the panel here is showing another, a sample of red blood cells and immune cells from the alligators. And what we noticed is there were these kind of strange-looking broken blood cells. And these are hallmark signs of organ damage of the vasculature, and one of the hallmarks of the autoimmune disease lupus. So we went on and then looked at some more endpoints, created assays that we could look at things like autoantibodies in alligators, and found that there were increases in autoantibodies. And then we looked at molecular mechanisms of autoimmunity and found very high lupus signature gene activity in these animals. And when I say very high, we often, see 1 or 2-fold changes. These were on the order of 400 and 500 times higher than those animals in the lower PFAS area. And since we are sharing this now with our students at the graduate school level, at the college level, but we also have made a paradigm shift in how we're publishing our science. At the same time that this study came through peer review, we had worked with colleagues that are K through 12 educational experts, and at the same time this was published, these results were now incorporated into the North Carolina science curriculum in both high school and middle school. And I think what we want to do, and what we are working very hard at doing, is empowering the next generation. We care about our children and our grandchildren, and we're trying to pass the baton for better stewardship and better decision-making where they can turn to companies that are trying to remove toxic or the worst toxic chemicals out of their supply chain. And you can find this the retailer port card that's available online as a tool to make decisions, and we want to empower all people to take over, to have a safer planet. Thank you.